Here's a summer travel tip. Pack just one pair of shoes that goes with every outfit, like the versatile, perfectly packable Tree shoes from Allbirds. Find your pair of Tree Dashers 2, runners, pipers, and more at allbirds.com. That's ALLBIRDS.com.
And so we may never know the best place in Houston, Texas to get good barbecue. Truly one of life's most unsolvable mysteries. What's going on, spectators? Welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of Spectales. I'm your fearless host, Jake, along with my co-host and reigning champion of the world, Jesus. What's going on, Jesus?
Man, that sounds like a challenge. That sounds like you introduced me as the champion and there's a challenger. Who's the challenger is what I want to know. Who's going to challenge us on these grail tales that we got? Because we have some pretty nice grail tales coming up.
Step up to the plate. Hey, actually, speaking of, we could use a few grail tales from all you listeners out there. It's been a while since we've had a listener submitted grail tale, so why don't you send that in? Now, if this is your first time joining us for Spectales, thank you for giving us a listen. Spectales is a comic book podcast that has collectors and creators. What's your grail tale? Each week, we explore new stories about the comic book grails we love and the epic journeys behind how they were obtained or how they inspired new creativity.
We also dive into some comic book speculation and how, as collectors, we can help the hobby pay for itself.
Now, this week, Jesus, our episode is being sponsored by Serendipity. That's right. When life works out in wild and wonderful ways, Serendipity.
Yeah, man, this is one of those things where a grail tale begot a grail tale. It was a grail tale inception. We told one grail tale, and that led us to the grail tale that we're about to share with you guys today, which is pretty freaking phenomenal, if you ask me.
Yeah, honestly, I think what we're really trying to say here is the grail tale provides, right?
Yeah, the grail tale provides. Yes, the grail tale provides.
This week, we got Tom Brevoort on, the executive editor, head senior editor over at Marvel, who's been around, longest standing editor at Marvel to date. So it was incredible. And the story just behind how we got Tom to come on the show is just as amazing.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with Tom. Tom's a very good guy. We really appreciate him coming on the show. And I mean, what are we waiting for, man? Come on, let's do it.
No, let's do it. So, never doubt who Marvel's greatest villain of the last century is, and ready the Imperious Rex battle cry. This is episode 67.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spectales, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
Hello and salutations, spectators. Welcome to the latest here-tastic episode of Spectales. This week, we've got quite the special treat for everybody, a guest you all should be very excited about, a grail tale that brings one of our previous creator grail journeys full circle. Our guest has a resume considerably longer than my arm. He began working for Marvel Comics as an intern in 1989 and climbed the ladder from there to become one of the most recognizable and respected editors in the history of comics. He currently holds the title of Marvel's longest-standing editor and is considered to be a walking encyclopedia of pure Marvel knowledge. There is literally nobody else in the world I could be talking about. He is the one and only Mr. Tom Brevoort. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jake. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you, Tom. We're really excited to be here with you, the walking encyclopedia of Marvel. I've always wanted to ask all these crazy questions, specifically about the Ultimate Nullifier, but I will leave that for later on.
What do you have a quick question? Do you have one off the top of your head? Ultimate Nullifier. Let's go.
Ultimate Nullifier. Okay, so if Galactus is scared of the Ultimate Nullifier, right? Why was it not used to nullify him and get him out so that he did not create all the chaos that he's created and you know all the deaths that were caused because he wanted to eat?
As we've seen in a number of stories, most notably John Byrne's Trial of Galactus from the mid-'80s, Galactus serves an essential function within the span of the universe, and that ultimately, when you get to the heat death at the end of the universe, when everything is closing down and entropy is setting in and there's nothing left, Galactus will expunge all the energy and all the stuff that he has consumed over all this time to create the next universe. So actually getting rid of him and nullifying him and so forth is not really a good idea. It's like disrupting the food chain or something. So while the ultimate nullifier is a thing to be feared, we just revealed recently in the Reckoning War that it was a Watcher weapon. It's not really a good idea to wipe Galactus out because he's actually there for a reason, in the same sort of way that maybe you don't want to get rid of all the spiders because they actually do a thing, and if you lose all the spiders, suddenly you have all kinds of whatever flies and wasps and whatever everywhere. It disrupts the balance of things. Galactus is an essential part of your complete breakfast and the functioning of the universe.
Galactus is one of my favorite characters. He really is, not only just from the comic books, but also I play video games, and he was on Marvel vs. Capcom. He was a big boss. I loved him. But there's also one piece in I think it's Silver Surfer number 48 and 49, I believe, or something, when it's talking about what Galactus did for the Silver Surfer. And I just thought that was so interesting, where I guess he considers him a friend or something, and he took away his guilt. Because if he gave him his guilt, it'd be too much for him to bear. And he did that for him. And that's not normally something that Galactus would do, but I just thought that was such an interesting part of the Galactus mythos. Do you have any anecdotes like that about Galactus? Just for me personally.
Not specifically. That was a nice story by Ron Mars and Ron Lim. And it was really their way to try to reconcile the fact that the Silver Surfer that we see in the earliest stories that he appears in, the Jack Kirby Silver Surfer from Fantastic Four, doesn't really quite line up with the origin of the Silver Surfer that Stan and John Buscema do a couple of years later. The Surfer, as Kirby conceived him, was created whole cloth by Galactus. He was a pure being who didn't know a lot about the universe, and that's why when he comes down, Alicia Masters teaches him by example about a bunch of stuff, and he realizes his guilt in wiping out planets, and he turns against Galactus. That doesn't really track with him having been Norrin Radd, this guy on another planet who sacrifices himself to save his home and goes off with Galactus. So Ron kind of took those two ideas and went, how can I make sense of that? Well, Galactus must have as an aftermath or as part of turning him into the Silver Surfer, sort of removed his knowledge of the past that he had, so that he could act as one who was innocent and didn't have to carry the guilt of being the harbinger of death and doing all these things that he agreed to do and that he needed to do. So really, as much as anything, that's Ron just kind of patching over a continuity crack, but he does it in a way that's pretty effective.
It was very cool. Very cool.
Oh my God. That's so awesome way to start off the podcast episode. Tom, I would like to also maybe lead off with a little bit more of an existential question maybe for you, considering your, absolute knowledge of the Marvel world. Is there a character, because you've been involved in working on everybody, right? All the characters. However, is there one that you either relate to, or is there one specific that inspires you more than others?
I don't know about inspires me per se. My favorite Marvel character is the Thing. I like the Thing. I don't know that I relate to the Thing. Some people will say in certain attributes I'm similar to the Thing in that I'm gruff and grumpy all the time and prickly, and also I only have 3 fingers, so there's that. We have that in common too. Really that's a character that has always spoken to me. But most of the core Marvel characters appeal on one level or another. Some of it just depends on the story they're in. I can certainly relate to a Spider-Man, a Peter Parker, and I can relate to a Steve Rogers, and I can relate to a whoever, Tony Stark or a Scott Summers or Matt Murdock. Pick your guy. Depending on the story that's being told and so forth. That's really the real secret to what Lee and Kirby and all the early creators did there was make all of the early Marvel characters people that you could connect with and get invested in on an emotional level. And everybody that's come since has done the same thing and built on that with the later characters, your Kitty Prydes maybe, or your Rogues, or your whomevers.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on the connection and why it's been such a success story for Marvel with all of these very relatable heroes. Do you feel like villains have to have some form of a redeeming or relatable quality in order for them to have longevity?
To have longevity, they don't necessarily need to have a redeeming quality, but they need to have a quality of interest about them. Certainly, nobody's going to confuse Doctor Doom for a nice guy. Doctor Doom is a collection of flaws and foibles, but they're interesting flaws and foibles, and the way he chooses to grapple with them is interesting. And he's multifaceted enough that in a given situation, he will do the right thing and he will act nobly or try to present himself in a certain fashion. And that lets him be more interesting. Thanos is more interesting than just a big purple guy that goes around blowing up stuff.
Yeah.
He's got some perspective to him. He's got a point of view to him. And those layers make him more interesting than just another big goon from outer space. And again, the same thing kind of goes through. And with a lot of these characters, they developed these facets as time went on, and as you got more stories and different people added to them and so forth. Magneto back in the 60s was relatively two-dimensional, but as people got into the 80s and particularly Chris Claremont started to add more nuance to his backstory, and we learn more about him, suddenly he becomes a character that you can't necessarily agree with, but you could understand how he got to be where he is and what pushes him to do the things that he does, in a sense. So yeah, I tend to think that the villains that stand the test of time have something about them that's more interesting than just they're in opposition to the hero and they punch really hard.
Well, and not simply just opposition to the hero. In many cases, like Magneto, he is the yin to Dr. Xavier's yang, right? Like a lot of villains have that counterpart that they almost have to go along with. You can't do one without the other.
Sure.
I always loved that.
I mean, you can certainly do a Magneto story or a Doctor Doom story without the other half, but the stories with those characters tend to be the ones that are the most memorable. Like, it's fun to see Doctor Doom fight, I don't know, Iron Man, because they're two guys in armor.
Yeah.
And they're both smart guys. But it doesn't have the same resonance as it does when he's fighting the Fantastic Four, with whom he has a long relationship that goes back to his time in college with them. So it's not like an Iron Man Doctor Doom story can't work. There have been plenty of them over the years, and some of them have been excellent. It's just it's a lot easier to get there with the character that's at the crux.
Yeah, well, and all the geeks love to connect the canon, right? That's what we want.
Yeah. I do have a quick question about villains for you, Tom. In the last, I want to say 10 to 12 years, what would you say is one of your favorite villains that has been introduced or reintroduced in Marvel?
Oh, I have no idea. You'll find that the easiest way to stymie me on these things is to ask me, what's your favorite this, or what's the best this? Because my brain just seizes up at that point. There's too much stuff, and it's all going through the pipeline at once. Things I'm working on, things other people are working on that I'm involved with or overseeing or just watching. And I can never. I have the hardest time in the world pulling an example out there, at least quickly. So I don't know that I have a great. Let me turn that around on you. What do you think the best villain that we've done in the last 10 years or so is?
Well, I mean, I think it's biased. I like Donny Cates' writing, so I'm gonna go with the.
You're right. Donny Cates is the best villain that we've had. You've put your finger on it there. I think you're absolutely right. It's Donny.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Can we gotta leave it at that?
I'm just gonna leave it at that. I love that. I love that.
Recent pickups.
Okay, so every week we like to talk about something we've recently read, recently a collectible that we've gotten. It can be whatever you make of it. Sometimes we just go over a book that we read this week. But Jesus, you traditionally kick this segment off. Would you like to start first?
Sure. I have been holding on to this for the entirety of this recording. I finally got something back from CGC. It's right here. I know we're not in October anymore, but it's Tomb of Dracula, #1, first appearance of Dracula. Beautiful cover, beautiful Gene Colan art. The red pops on it. It took a year for me to get this back. 7.5, very happy with the grade. I'm very happy with how it presents, but this is my recent pickup. And, while it was in CGC the whole time, I'm like, man, I'm going to sell this. But now that I have it in my hand, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell it, man. It's just such a cool cover to me. And I'm being serious. Like, I'm joking around, but at the same time, I'm like, man, this is a really cool book. I have a cool story behind it as well. So I don't know. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to
I think
sell.
You always have to weigh this stuff, because there's nothing worse really than when you sell something or get rid of something, and 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever later, you have seller's regret, and you're sitting there going, oh, why did I ever let that thing out? So you really have to be. This is why I'm not a buyer and a seller so much, because I don't sell anything, because I just know I've had enough occasions where I've let something go or get away from me that I regret, to know that, like, yeah, I can't do that part of it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Jake and I we have this battle going back and forth on what we should sell, what we should not sell. And I don't know. I'm really debating this one. Right now, it's a no.
You can always sell it tomorrow. You can always sell it next week.
That's true.
That is a good way to look at it. And that's, that always plays into kind of the decisions. And sometimes it's really also, if there's something you want more, right? Like the trading factor, right? The idea that you could sell that book in order to get a grail that is higher up on your list or something like that. But I know from personal experience, that is a really cool cover. And once you have it in your hands, it's hard to let it go.
It is, man. It really is. I don't think I've had this feeling before. Because I'm telling you, the whole year that it was over, I was like, I can't wait to get it so I could sell it. Oh my God, I could have sold it already. And now I got it. I'm like, ooh, man, maybe. Nope, I don't think I'm going to.
Jesus, you know what it pairs really nicely with? Side by side, they look like best friends. Marvel Spotlight #2. That cover next to the Tomb of Dracula #1. You put those side by side on a shelf and you will never touch that shelf. They're so cool.
So they're so scary, is what you're saying.
No, I mean this time of year. But no, congrats. I'm glad you got it. Tom, is there a book or a collectible or something that you want to bring up?
Well, again, I don't do a lot of collecting anymore. Largely because I've got everything, or I've got a lot. And in fact, I hit a certain point that's now 10, 15 years ago, where I got a particular book and it arrived and I went, I paid the most for it that I've ever paid for a book, single book, and I kind of went, I don't really think I need anything else. and that just, that particular gene burned out of me, which is unfortunate and kind of sad because I'll go to conventions and things as part of the job. And one of the things that I would routinely do at those shows was walk around and look in long boxes and pull up random comics and buy them. And I'll still do a little of that, but not very seriously. So, during the last couple of years, what I've mostly been doing is picking up, copies of old DC 100-page super spectaculars from the early 70s. Largely because I liked the format. I grew up with it as a kid. And here's the sad part. I kind of have them all, but they're all upstairs in boxes. And so it's kind of like, I'll order a couple of them. That book will cost me $5. They'll deliver it to me. I'll open it up. I'll read it. I'll put it on the spinner rack of extra comics, and that'll be that. It's easier than going upstairs and looking and moving the boxes. Which fortunately, given that I have gainful employment and all, I can afford to do. So it's but it is really really sort of ridiculous. But like that's the kind of thing that I've been doing that. I've been picking up oddball issues of Julie Schwartz edited Action Comics and Superman comics from the 70s and 80s during periods that I wasn't reading either before me or when I had stopped and moved on to other things. So those are all just kind of like a little weird nostalgia hit. But I'm not in any avid way. Every once in a while there might be some rarity. The other week, because one of the things I've been doing on Twitter for the last year, again, sort of like the Danny Wallace thing, is starting at the top of the year. Every day I've been posting 4 covers that were on sale that date in 5-year increments. So if there were any comics on sale today, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so forth, years ago, I'll post them. And it's just a thing I've been doing for the last, 250 days. But a few weeks back, a book showed up and I posted it that I'd never seen before. An 80s. It looked like a Warren magazine, but it wasn't a Warren magazine. It was published by Archie Red Circle, this thing called Basically Strange. And it was just a collection of reprinted stories by Alex Toth and Neil Adams and a bunch of great people. I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it before. I was tweeting with Kurt Busiek. He'd never heard of it before. And so I immediately went online and went, let me see if I could find a copy of this. And I could. And, $11 later, I now have a copy of that.
Did you make it through it? Did you read it?
It's on my to be read shelf. And that's a full bookshelf. That's not like a single shelf. It's among the many things that are there to be read.
Yeah, I imagine the stacks eventually become shelves if you let it get away.
Yes, they do. But it's a nice problem to have.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I will go ahead and I will share mine. So I was going back through, and something that I like to do, and Jesus and I have talked about, we both like to do this, with the MCU always coming out with, new shows and new events of sorts. We like to read books that are in, around, or adjacent to potential storylines that they could be going into. So I decided to pick up a book. And Tom, I know you know about this book. This is What If Secret Invasion #1. And it is, I like the what if stories. I always have fun with it. Now, Tom, I know you were a consulting editor on this, I believe, was the credit that was given to you.
Yeah, I didn't work on it directly. I was the editor of Secret Invasion. So chances are at some point when they were working on that book, they came to me to double check stuff or to give them, I had huge charts and diagrams of things like where all the characters were and who were Skrulls when, and when it was Hank Pym Skrull number 1 and when it was Hank Pym Skrull number 2, and so they probably, I probably did stuff like that on it. I don't remember offhand who the actual editor of that would have been. It would have been one of 2 or 3 different people. Might have been C.B. Sapolsky, might have been Brian Smith, might have been one of a couple of other people.
So, yeah, I mean, the list, there is an assistant editor of A.J. Fierro, associate editor Chris Allo, consulting editor Tom Yu, and then, it looks like Justin Gabri?
Justin Gabri.
Was the editor, and editor-in-chief was Joe Quesada. So
right. So the credit there that matters is editor. So Justin Gabri was the editor of that book.
Okay. All right.
He didn't typically do a lot of editing. He was actually part of the talent management group at that time. But I think this was one of those instances where, because we were doing the What If books, and they were all one-offs and things, and he had come out of it. He'd done editing in the past and such. It was an easy thing to go, hey, maybe Justin wants to do this or these. He may have done all 5 of them that year. I don't remember.
And the thing one of the reasons why I picked this one up was I really do love to get into the what if side of things. And I always love when I see things that happen in a what if, and maybe it sneaks its way in, or storylines feel like they've been impacted later on down the road because of something that may have transpired in a what if. That maybe it's just a nod, maybe it's nothing, maybe it never comes back. But something about the what ifs always make me feel. I mean, they do what they say they're going to do. What if? And it always feels like they could be telling you a little bit about the future. So this was a really fun read. There was a little Easter egg at the end that I'm going to bring up. Tom, do you remember the say what at the end of it?
No, I don't.
You're in it, actually. So this is one of your appearances.
Was I in it, or was the me of like Earth 818 in it? Because that's a different.
No, you're a different
dude.
Yeah, so you make an appearance in 616 like 12 times. I did a little bit of research on that, but this
I'd be willing to bet it's more. But okay,
probably. Well, the documented ones that I could find is at 12. But
I will accept your count on that.
This particular one is just it's a say what, where it says, what if Marvel's senior editorial staff were Skrulls? And I'm hoping you can see it there. Basically, it's got the entire staff there. You're at the far end here with the beard, and your line is off with his head, and you're holding an axe.
That's all about right. I never had an axe, but I did keep a crowbar in my office for about 15
years. Just for decoration, right?
It was there. Sure, it was attached to the desk. I had it on like a holster on the side of the desk, and it was a genuine crowbar. There was a year back when we were making the Jessica Jones show, where David Tennant came up to the office to do interviews and promote stuff and such. And as a surprise for somebody, like, we hid him out in my office. So he hung out in my office for like 15 minutes, and we talked about stuff. And he, saw this crowbar hanging on the wall, and he was like, "Why do you have a crowbar on the wall?" And I said to him, "Respect."
Oh, that is awesome. Well, they exchanged your crowbar for an axe, and it is all the more menacing.
Well, that seems fair. It seems equitable. I don't mind that.
Grail tale. Grail tale. Grail tale. Grail tale. Grail tale.
Well, Tom, as you can tell, we would go off the nerd rails in a heartbeat and just talk to you for the next 2 hours about just the random Marvel questions we have. But we do actually have a small agenda here that we would like to get to. So you're joining our show in part because we had an individual on in October, Ryan Little, who traded with you all 15 some years ago, something along those lines, traded with you as you were on a journey to collect Fantastic Four #1. You were a trade journey as you were on.
Yes. That was all a part of back in those days, in the olden times.
Yeah, not so long ago though.
Between, I think it was between around 2007 and 2010. As Marvel.com went through that particular iteration of being refreshed and reworked and whatnot, one of the things that we had started up there was that different editors got to do blogs. And most editors or most offices would put up a post like every couple of weeks or whatnot. And I ended up, doing one virtually every day, sometimes 3 days a week or whatever. I did a lot of them. I think, and those are all gone now. Those posts are all in the wind, because the site's been refreshed so many times that, it's just all that stuff is gone. But I remember that, before they went, like there'd be a little tally on the main page for the blogs that would say how many entries a thing had. And this one had 12, and this one had 28, and this one had 9, and this one had 541. And that was me. And so constantly, I was looking for things to do that would be interesting, and that would make for fodder for this blog. Because typically it wasn't too difficult to come up with something to write about every day. Whatever was going on in comics at that time, or and it didn't have to be deathless prose. It was a blog. The spelling wasn't even good, but it had to be something. And so at one point, I became a fan of a British writer and a presenter named Danny Wallace. One of my old assistant editors turned me on to Danny Wallace's books, and from there I discovered his canon of work. Him and his old roommate Dave Gorman, and what these guys would do, and what became kind of their shtick individually, although they started it together, is they would embark on weird challenges to themselves, and then they would write about them, and they would turn them into books. The most famous one, Danny Wallace wrote the book Yes Man, which became a fairly terrible movie, but the book is great, because the book is all real, and that book is all about Danny Wallace deciding that he's been too much in his shell and too introverted in his life and too negative about things. And so for the next 30 days, he's going to say yes to everything. Anything that anybody asks him, he will say yes to, and he will follow through on. And that's the book. And it's terrific. The first book in that sequence was when he and Dave Gorman were living together, roommates, and on a bet, they tried to locate and meet 54 other people named Dave Gorman. and they did. And Dave Gorman made a 6-part TV series out of that in the UK. So they had done things like this. And so having read, I assume, I haven't looked back at the timeline or anything, but I assume probably some new book had come out around then that Danny Wallace had done, or some new show. I may have seen his show How to Start a Country, where he founds a country at that time. And so I was thinking along those lines, like, what stuff could you do like that I could do on the blog? And the other thing that had been sort of bandying about in the air in those days was there was some website where a guy had started with a paperclip and had traded his way up to owning a house.
Yep, I remember that.
And again, I never actually read the site, but I'd heard about that. And that made me kind of think. One of the things I've got, you can sort of vaguely see it over my shoulder here in this dark room. I have a couple of spinner racks in the house, but I have this spinner rack here, and what's on it is just a whole bunch of random comics from over the years that I happen to have duplicates of. So every time, through some happenstance, I happen to end up with extra copies of something, they get thrown onto the spinner rack, and they're just sort of like, reader copies. I can just, and once a week I rotate the spinner rack, and that's like a little ornament. So it occurred to me to try, to combine all of these things and to see if I could start out with 5 random junk comics from off of my spinner rack and trade my way all the way up to a copy of Fantastic Four #1. And fairly early in the process, it wasn't right from the beginning, but fairly early in the process, I worked out with Jim McLaughlin over at the Hero Initiative that once this was all said and done, we'd give the Fantastic Four #1 and everything else that was left to Hero. They could then, sell it or auction it or do whatever with it, and that would generate revenue for them. So it was all towards a good cause. Hero is the charity that's set up to help out and to support comic book creators who have fallen on hard times. Mm-hmm. And they do a lot of good work, and everybody that's listening here should send them $1. Send
Absolutely.
them $1.
You heard Tom, everybody. Go, hey, stop, press pause right now. Go to the Hero Initiative's website and send them $1. We're not going to start until you have finished what Tom just told you to do.
$2 million donation coming up. That's what it's going to be.
There we go. $1 won't hurt you. So that was it. So I set out. I wrote the first post about this on the website on whatever day it happened to be. I had the 5 comics. I explained the whole thing. Here's how it works. Here's what we're doing. Here's what I'm trying to do. So if you want to offer me, and I did some shtick about how every comic shop and every bag and every whatever had signs that say buy, sell, trade. And when was the last time you ever heard of anybody trading comics? We used to do that all the time as kids, but it's sort of fallen off. So here's the thing: let's trade comics. I've got 5 comics here. Offer me something for any of this. And as we go, I'll update the site, on a regular basis and say, here's what got traded. Here's what's in inventory right now. And hopefully over time, we can get to a copy of Fantastic Four #1. And I spared no expense using my completely limited Photoshop skills to craft the certificate of meaninglessness that was included with every trade that I made. And that was really, sort of a pastiche on the fact that you'd go to stores and they'd have signings and things, or they'd have special books, and they'd include a certificate of authenticity. And I always looked at that as like, that's great, but can anybody just like print out a certificate of it? It doesn't really say anything other than I say that this is the thing that it is. So the certificate of meaninglessness, it was, very, I don't remember all of the wording on it, other than I know by the end of it, it was begging people, please don't counterfeit these. Really honest, no fooling. So it was just a certificate with an old Marvel seal on it that said I've been part of Tom Brevoort's trading experiment. I gave him these books and I got these books and I'm trade number whatever, and it would be signed by me, and I would fill them out as I packed up whatever stuff was being sent back out to people.
Hey, Tom, if I could interject here and ask a quick question, because something I guess from the start, did you have to get any approval? Did you have to ask anybody if you could do this, or was this just you just went on your own and you just did it?
I just did it. I mean, again, it was all sort of for the blog, and it wasn't like it was a secret I was doing it.
Sure.
Nobody cared one way or another. There was no money involved. There's no legal requirement. It's really just, I got 5 comics, trade me something. You trade it to me, and I agree to it. You send it to me. Once I get it, I will send you back the books that you've traded for and the certificate. And that was it. And it, because it became successful over the, I think we ran it for like about 3 months before it was over. Because it, had a certain amount of success, there was some pickup and some attention paid to it, and a couple of articles on the comic book news sites of the day, and Marvel.com did things, and Hero helped to sponsor and do things to promote it, because ultimately it was in everybody's best interest, and it was a fun thing. Marvel, for all that we're a big heartless evil corporation, we actually do like to have a good time from time to time, and we will do things like this on occasion. So yeah, there was nobody badder than I. It was just the latest stupid thing that was being done that week, and it just happened to be being done by me as opposed to somebody else who did a stupid thing the week before.
Okay, so sorry, Jesus, go ahead. I interrupted.
So I guess quick commentary commentary. The trading thing is awesome. The community is awesome. You mentioned on one of your early blogs that at some point Marvel said that some of those early books were traded up to 6 times. So they really had 6 readers for one comic versus just one reader. And that's how they kind of like puffed up a little bit of their readership numbers. But then also looking back, I was looking at this and I was like, man, this is so interesting, because you were talking about no cash, right? Well, that was right in the middle of the recession, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that also helped fuel this thing, because people didn't have to put cash out; they just traded.
It certainly could, and again, most of the people who traded with me, were much more generous than they had any call to be, and really I expected anybody to be. There were a couple of guys, I still remember Jeff Price's name after all these years, because not only did he trade with me a couple of times and always gave better stuff than he got, but he would send me stuff. Hey, I came across this couple of books. I want to donate them to the trading pile. So here they are. People would do that all the time. The writer you had on, a few months ago, Eric, he and I, once we came into contact again on Twitter, because of this, he said that, like, he told me like what the trade was, and I said, I think I got the better of that one. And he said, yeah, but that was kind of the whole idea, right? Like, you encouraged everybody to be more generous, because at the end of the day, it was all going to charity. So you got some cool comics. You maybe got rid of some stuff that, it wasn't like it was bad stuff. Some of it was really good stuff, but that for whatever reason you didn't want or didn't need, and you could feel good because it was all going to a good cause, and you were part of this thing, and you got a dopey certificate to commemorate the fact that you did this, and it was fun, and you got to see your name on a Marvel blog that's not there anymore.
But that was his grail. That, like, when we had him on, he told the story. That was his grail tale. He held that certificate above all else that he had, simply because of the experience that he had and how it impacted his life. Because at the time he was a child, and he now is working in the writer's room at Marvel, at the MCU. So it really impacted him.
Well, I'm glad for that. I hope that pretty much everybody that was involved with it walked away, feeling good and having good memories of it and so forth. I don't remember there being any negative experiences. The worst thing that ever happened is every once in a while somebody would offer a trade and the books would never show up. And so after a certain point, I just go, we never got these. So those books, the books that were going to be put aside to be traded with that guy, they go back into the pot. And so people can now trade for them. But that was the worst that ever happened. I mean, literally, people would send all kinds of stuff too. Like, we had somebody traded me one of those Bowen busts, little mini statue. So one of the things you could trade for now was this little Cyclops mini statue. And those are not, they're not as expensive as a full on, Bowen sculpture, but those aren't cheap.
No.
And I had books that went through there that were, we had Hulk 2 and 4. Those are not cheap comic books. I had a Golden Age issue of Submariner from the 40s.
That's incredible.
That came through. That one came from my local comic shop in Manhattan, Jim Handley's Universe, which is these days JHU, and who wanted to be in on it. And not only did they make a trade with me and trade me the Golden Age Submariner, but they took the certificate and they framed it and mounted it on the wall. So for years, they've moved to a new location. I don't know that it's still there, but it might be, because they kind of got behind it and got into it. But yeah, I had the first appearance of the character we were talking about at the top, Galactus and the Silver Surfer. First appearance, that was in the trading stack at one point. First Punisher, it was there. These are all books that were not cheap comics. In the late 2000s, they're presumably worth more today. I just think of how much more they are worth with the additional certificate of meaninglessness. Like that can't be, and at a certain point too, Jim McLaughlin, because Jim did a lot of work with Stan for charity and whatnot. He got Stan to get involved, and Stan sent me 5 or 6 books out of whatever he had hanging around his office, random old copies of things that he'd written that he signed. And so now you could get a signed copy of Strange Tales 155 from Stan, as a trade. Just offer me something that'll make me go, yeah, okay, I'll take that trade. Let's go. Let's do it. And so we worked our way towards getting the Fantastic Four 1.
Oh my God. Do you happen to recall the time period, like how long it went? I think you said like 08 to 010, something around there.
The blog ran from 07 to 010.
Okay.
The trading was 3 months or less.
Wow.
We got it done. We got it sorted in 3 months or less. We had a false alarm too. There was a point where somebody showed up saying, I will trade you. I've got a Fantastic Four 1. I'll trade you. And we made actually arrangements because the guy, he was a young guy, so I'll say the kid, was local. He was in New York. And so we made arrangements. You'll come up to the office. We'll film this thing. We'll put it on Marvel.com. And we did. And he was excited. He got to be up at the Marvel offices and see stuff. And he traded me the Fantastic Four 1. And as soon as he pulled it out, I knew what it was. He didn't. He thought it was a Fantastic Four number 1. And I still went through with whatever that trade was. But what it actually was in 1966.
The reprint.
Golden Records did book and record reprints, and this was the reprint comic of Fantastic Four number 1. And so we did the whole thing. I let the kid leave and be happy, and then we went. We can't use the footage. We can't use any of that. We just have to keep going because I didn't want to spoil it for him and go, oh no, what you got there is not FF1. I can spoil it for him now. He's 15 years older. I'm sure he can take it now. But back then, this was like a cool special day for this guy. But eventually there was a second person who had an FF1, and I believe, I'm not 100% certain because it's been a while, but I believe they came up to the office with it as well, and we did the last trade in person.
Well, if the first individual didn't know at the time, they certainly found out when they realized that you didn't use any of their footage or talk about their book.
Yeah, assuming that they were still reading the blog.
Oh yeah,
they certainly would have known because I would have said I think I told the story on the blog because I need something to write about that day.
Yeah, of course.
But it was fine. It was just it wasn't like anybody's angry. It was just this didn't work out. This missed, and that's part of the culture of trading and such as well. I can remember, as a kid, you would, you never knew where you would find comics, And so you would check places out. And I remember once, stumbling across this place having a garage sale in my neighborhood. Just a household having a garage sale. I happened to wander by there at 2 p.m. or whatever day it was, and I went in and I looked around, and they had like a couple of random Archie issues or whatever, and I was talking to whoever the guy was, and the guy said, "Yeah, like we had all these great comics from the '60s, but they all sold like hours ago." And it's like, if only I had been here. Any collector of a certain age has a story like that, of the one that got away or the thing that got missed. And most of them also have a story that's the windfall story. Mm-hmm. I have a windfall story, and I write about it now at the tombrevoort.com blog, which is like the Marvel blog, except it's not Marvel. It's just me with my name. And that was in 1988 when I was in college. I had to send something to somebody, package. I was doing a lot of work on fanzines and things in the day, so it may have been something for one of those. I don't remember. But I went to my local post office in Delaware, and I'm waiting in line. And ahead of me, there's a guy that's packaging up stuff. And I happen to see that what he's packaging up is this Golden Age issue of Human Torch. Ooh. And I'm not, I'm hardly the most social individual in the world. But I can't help myself from going up to the guy and saying, "Wow, that's like a really nice book." And we get to talking. And the guy says to me, "Hey, I got an ad that's running in the Comics Buyer's Guide in like a week or two, because I've got like a box of stuff that I'm trying to get rid of, bunch of comics that I don't need or don't want. If you want to come out and take a look at them, that, let's do that." And I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And I went out, and he had a box of, it was about 150, really early Silver Age books. And he wanted $50 for it.
Oh, man.
And I bought them. I bought the box. So each book in that cost me 33 cents. And, I spent the next, month and a half slowly reading my way through these 150 comics, all of which pretty much I still have, to this day. And that's the windfall story. Like any real collector of a certain era will have at least one of each.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Jesus has a story about losing a windfall, losing a Fantastic Four #1 that we've talked about.
Yeah, Jake loves bringing it up. It was our first episode because it twisted my heart. And actually, it's funny because, Fantastic Four #1, yes, it was the launch of the Marvel and the team and all that. But I was going to use it to trade because I wanted to get AF-15. That's my grail that I still have not got. Mm-hmm. And I had a deal in place for it. And then about 3 hours later, I get a message online, and he's like, "Hey, I talked it over with my family, and I'm not going to sell them. Thank you for your offer." And that was it. That was it. That's why they were mine for like 3 hours, and then they were gone.
That's too bad. That's too bad. Sorry to hear it. But it's no fault. It's not like you did anything. It's not like it was going to go that way no matter what.
Yeah, and like you said, as a collector, I've had windfalls, right? And I've had, stuff like that. But it's always good to be in the community and hear your story as well. Like of this Fantastic Four. Like now in my mind, this Fantastic Four #1 that you traded for and was given to charity and sold eventually. Now I kind of want to track it down and see who has it, who's the owner now, because it does have a serial number on it, so we can maybe find out.
It's got a serial. All I remember about it was CGC'd, and it was a 1.5. But there's photos. You could find photos of me holding the thing online. You probably could look up the serial number if the photo is good enough. And try to figure out who actually has it today, or if they have the certificate, which I'm sure, was maintained. I'm sure they CGC'd that as well, because you need to have it as a companion piece.
Well, was that so? The Hero Initiative, when they gave that away, or when they auctioned that off, or however they used it, I suppose they would auction it to actually get the money for it. But when they did that, there was included a certificate with that one as well.
I believe I gave. I'm not sure actually. Now that you say that, I believe I gave McLaughlin a supply of those, but I can't swear by it. So I could have, but it's also possible not. And they did. They auctioned the whole everything that they had left of any value.
Do you remember offhand a rough estimate of how much was raised?
I think. I mean, all total, it was X grand. I don't remember the actual number. Jim might, but I just remember it as, hey, we raised a couple of $1,000s for this. That's great. Like I wasn't in this for the money side. I was in it just for the stupid fun of it, and then eventually I was in it for the, oh God, let me get an FF1 because this is taking a ton of time, and there are books everywhere here.
Yeah,
like I had a shelf and a half full of stuff in my office that was all the trading stuff, because again, people would be fairly generous, or would sometimes feel like, well, if they wanted something that was a little more rare, they'd have to offer something more. So here's the whole run of Secret Invasion, and I'll give you that for this one comic. And I take that trade, but that's 8 books rather than 1 book. So now that's a bigger stack, and the stacks would just grow. It was sort of crazy after a while. Over at my tombrevoort.com blog or page, I've been reprinting. I've got from the Wayback Machine, not all of those original Marvel.com blog posts, but I got a bunch of them. And so I started just, one or twice a week, I'll post one of them up there again. And I haven't tended to repost the trading ones, apart from, I think I did the first one or the first 2 together and the last one, because 15 years later, it's not very interesting to read. Yeah, he traded Secret Wars 2 number 4 for a copy of, nobody cares enough about that. But the bigger highlights, I think, can still be found over there. So you can at least read, here's the stuff that started, and maybe here's the victory lap once we did it.
Did you find, Tom, towards the end of the trading, towards the end of this thing, when you knew you were getting close, right? Because when you're looking at ASM 129, or when the books start getting bigger and more valuable, did you find yourself surprised by how willing people were to give up, like, said book, ASM 129 or something like that, to get something else?
Well, sure. Again, people were more generous with this. And it's not like they traded me Amazing Spider-Man 129 for a random copy of Secret Invasion. The trades were semi-equitable, but in most cases, people were generous because of what it was and what it represented. They knew it was a charitable thing. They knew it was in the spirit of fun. And so they gave more than they would get. But they wouldn't give so much more. These trades were things I could stand behind. I didn't rip anybody off in my pursuit of Fantastic Four #1. These were all legitimate, umpire-approved, equitable exchanges. But yeah, I mean, it was super cool that people were so great about getting into the spirit of it and trading their stuff. And there were certainly a couple of times when I'd look at that trading stack and go, yeah, I don't have a Hulk #2. I'd really like a Hulk #2, and there's one right here. But I didn't keep any of that stuff. It was all part of the trading stock. So stuff went in and stuff went out. Fortunately too, like when I started this, I have a Fantastic Four #1. I have a complete set of Fantastic Four, and I had one at the time. So it wasn't like there was ever going to be any temptation, particularly apart from just I could have 2 Fantastic Four #1. To not, donate everything as we said we were going to do. But it was cool. And people liked it enough that they said to me, fans would come up or they'd write into the comments of the blog, well, you should do this again. And I kind of thought, well, what else? What else could I do that could top it? You could do an Amazing Fantasy 15. but it's kind of the same thing. Or you could do whatever, Marvel Comics #1, but nobody's going to trade me a Marvel Comics #1. There just aren't enough of them in the world.
Yeah.
And so I just couldn't come up with another version of it that I thought was different enough or warranted doing a second time. But it was a great experience end to end, and everybody that was involved with it, everybody that traded, and that partook in it, and that followed it, and that promoted it, we're all super terrific, consequently, it was much appreciated. And obviously, the Hero Initiative were happy with it. They got a little cash for their coffers and a little PR, because we would plug them all the time at all of the updates and stuff too. So possibly, people sent them $1, like all of your listeners did about 20 minutes ago. That was nice. Really, comic book fans in general are decent people. The theoretical, lessons that these characters are supposed to stand for and represent, people in and around our hobby, tend to have some of that, in their DNA. Not all the time. There are plenty of awful people, I'm sure, but even the awful people can Grinch-like do a nice thing under the right circumstances. And so, literally every interaction on that thing was positive.
Well, Tom, seriously, thank you very much for sharing the tale, because it is something that we every week we recount some sort of a tale or grail tale that we've had. Not all of them always end happy, but some of them do. And we always love to that's what makes collectors and guys like us collectors, right? There's just, like you said, the windfalls are always fun to talk about, and everybody likes to do it. So Tom, we have one last segment to roll into here before we let you go. And I promise we'll keep this one brief. Speculation. So this one's the speculation segment, where we like to just discuss maybe one thing that could be overlooked, maybe undervalued, or something that essentially we have a lot of listeners who have to help the hobby pay for itself, right? They don't have the essentially the super deep pockets where they can just essentially just say go and get themselves what they want, but they can trade, or they can buy and then sell and then maybe work their ways up to getting their grail, which is what our show is all about, people getting their grails. So we like to talk about it here, something that may have some value in the future. Hey, Zeus, I'm going to let you do the honors again on this. Would you give us a go?
All right, so this is actually somewhat of a retread, but I still think it's relevant. You've talked about the Fantastic Four annuals. I mentioned this when you talked about it. It's a little, I guess, fairly newer. It's Fantastic Four annual number 25, first cameo of the Anachronauts, which is Kang's Mercenaries. I mean, Kang is going to be everywhere. We recently saw him in the Quantumania trailer. This just, I don't know. I feel like it makes sense. They could come out. He's not going to do it all by himself. How did he get there? How's he going to get out of there? Maybe he has some people helping him. Maybe it's people you don't know, but they use that name. So I think stuff tied to Kang is going to be hot for a while. And some of the stuff is fairly affordable right now, like this Fantastic Four annual number 25. I think when we talked about it initially, I think it was like at $10. I think it's gone up to 15 now. And I think it's going to continue to creep up. So I still want to talk about that book. And that's my speculation pick for this week. And Tom, can you just go ahead and confirm it for me for everybody so that we know that this is going to come out?
Yeah, I don't know that I can do that. And let me say too that, like, I'm, well, certainly I'm aware of and I'm appreciative of the fact that there's, that speculation and that side of the hobby is a part of the hobby. The stuff I'm the most interested in is content, is the actual stories, and that's really the thing of value. For all that I can appreciate, collecting a particular book or having a thing, and the sort of profiteering of buying something low and selling something high. So I'll tell you that I killed off the Anachronauts with Kurt Busiek and Carlos Pacheco in Avengers Forever #3 in 1998. And that might also be a good investment because that's the one where they all get horribly, horribly destroyed because they were terrible, awful characters and we don't want them anymore. So there you go. My pick, Avengers Forever #3, 3 with a bullet.
Played it perfectly,
Awesome.
Tom. That is perfect. That is perfect. They're horrible characters, and we gotta get rid of them. All right. Well, mine is
unless they're in the movie, in which case they're great.
Good thing covering your bases there, Tom. That's perfect. All right. So I'll close out with mine, and mine is not MCU or Marvel related. Mine is it's not even a guilty pleasure. This is just something new to me that I'm kind of going nuts over right now, and that is manga. Jesus, I'm going to give you credit. You were the one who got me started on this stuff with One Punch Man and then just getting into all of it. I'm still new to it, right? But it is, I feel like it's going to just continue to get more and more popular. But my current favorite thing is Chainsaw Man. Now, this is a show on Hulu that I think they're on episode 3 or maybe 4 is already out. I think it came out Tuesday. But I looked into it. And it, of course, originally released in 2018, or at least the book that was dated in 2018. And it wasn't just the trade or the manga, which you can still go on and find. I dug deeper, and the first appearance of Chainsaw Man actually happened in, they call it a weekly Shonen Jump. And and so it's basically a book that collects a bunch of continuous stories, not individuals. Well, they're all individual stories, but it's all in one weekly magazine or book. I've never owned one of these. I am going to own one shortly. And I'm going to say that I think that this is already going to continue to gain popularity. I think Chainsaw Man is such a fun show. I've had a blast watching it. And I can't believe that I'm going to be the only one that says, this is so good. I want to see the original material. So if you want to go out and find it, Weekly Shonen Jump 2019 #1. Okay. The book released on December 3rd, 2018. So it says Jump #1 or 2019 #1 is the number on it. It came out in January of 2019, but it was dated for December 3rd, 2018. So it's a little confusing when you go back to try to find it. I did the work for you. Weekly Shonen Jump 2019 #1 is the book you're looking for. And it's already starting to gain a little eBay popularity. I was looking, the book ranges though. You can find it anywhere from in the $20 all the way into the hundreds. And I don't know what the differences are yet. I'm still trying to discern myself. Ultimately, I just feel like I want to get a physical copy of this because I want to read it. So I'm excited about that.
It's kind of hitting the zeitgeist right now, also because of when it came out. You should have seen how many people dressed up as Chainsaw Man for Halloween, both, here physically and also online, and also their pets. They were doing stuff with pets. So I just think it's a perfect timing for that character, and very popular right now. Very popular. And I actually like that medium of putting all these stories, because there's a lot of them like that where they're collected in the Shonen Jump, and that's where they started from.
Yeah, it's the other way around. They're printed serially in weekly magazines like Shonen Jump, and then eventually there's enough chapters that they collect them in the single manga volumes.
Exactly, which is also really cool. I would love to get the manga volume just to read it all at once. But there is something about having that first appearance that's the collector in me. Yep. So. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Spec Tales. Tom, thank you over and over and over again for agreeing to join us and for telling your tale, because it is literally the epitome of what a Grail tale is. So thank you.
Sure. Again, happy to do it. Happy to be here. Thanks for your hospitality.
everybody, if you didn't go to the Hero Initiative when we told you to earlier, this is probably a good time to go over and do that. And while you're at it, why don't you go check out Tom's website, which is just Tom's name, tombrevoort.com. He has a blog that you can subscribe to. It is extremely interesting. As you can tell by this conversation, that what Tom is saying here, this is what he puts on the blog. So we highly recommend it.
I just wanted to say thank you, Tom, for coming on. And if you ever really want to get down to the what if somebody used a nullifier in Galactus, by all means, I'm ready to write that story. And
all right, sit by the phone for my call.
I'm waiting here for it, starting now.
Hold your breath, Jesus. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Please come back next week where we'll have another fantastic guest. Have a good week.
Things there, so I don't have the same. I suppose I could if I really wanted to, but it being the only thing, like, it's no longer a destination space. I haven't built up an audience there. There's not enough people that would be paying attention, and even more importantly, at the moment, we're all still working remotely, so there's not even an office. So it's for the moment, the logistics of it would be astronomically more difficult than they were back in the day.
Who doesn't love a good challenge? No, I'm just joking.